Hello again, and I hope you're ready to hear a few more of my BuzzFeed-style trade wonk list. So, here we go. You know that you're a trade wonk if, at the gym, you're asked why your t-shirt says chorus. You still call it fast track. You plot to see if you can find more pro-trade acronym buttons than John Murphy. May 10th is part of your holiday calendar. It's listed on mine. And finally, you are still holding out that the FTAA is going to happen. Now with that, I would like to re-invite Congressman Blumenauer. He's serving double duty with us this evening, back to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Actually, the organizers were too cheap to buy a second dinner. It is truly a great pleasure and honor to be able to introduce Ron Wyden. Ron is a constituent. He is as he reminds me, he's been a partner and a friend that I've grown to deeply respect and admire. Any of you here seen Portlandia? Come on. You know what I'm talking about. It's the television show about Portland being a place where the 1990s are alive and well, where young people go to retire. No joke. I watched the first 3 episodes of Portlandia, and Ron can identify with this, before I realized that it was not a documentary, that it was a parody. I think we've walked in the Allergy Pride Parade, haven't we? There is a lot of our community represented in Portlandia. I mean, this is a place, my constituents voted 60-40 against fluoridation, and they're not so sure about vaccination. But I love these amazing people, and it's an honor to represent them. And this is Ron Wyden's base that he has represented for 36 years. It is a challenge. And watching Ron meet this challenge, I've learned a lot about service and politics. We've had conversations for months about how to address concerns that we hear from home about where people think trade agreements appear to have fallen short, systematically working through opportunities to address what people tell us they're concerned about. Ron has been drawing on his reservoir of respect and goodwill across the aisle in the Senate, across the Capitol, working with Paul and others, to be able to fashion adjustments to trade promotion authority that made it possible for us to have 28 Democrats voting for it in the House and the magnificent 13 in the Senate. Ron did this in a way that is entirely consistent with what is concerning people, thoughtfully translating it into legislative policy, and then getting that legislative policy approved by friends and colleagues. And I can't imagine how hard that was, but I've got a little sense. It's hard work. It's a heavy legislative lift based on intellect, personality, political experience, and instincts. And it's been really one of the more rewarding experiences I've had working with him on an ongoing basis, watching him make those policies into reality and forging this partnership with Paul and Orrin Hatch. Ron understands that this goes far beyond a trade agreement. Paul talked about shaping the rules of the road and where we go. It's about our fundamental role in the world. It's changing institutions in countries like Vietnam that go far beyond economics. It provides common ground to judge whether or not we're living up to our ideals and our expectations. And I will say, we wouldn't be here without Ron Wyden. He's tireless. He doesn't accept conventional wisdom. He looks for solutions instinctively that bring people together rather than divide them. Working with Ron on elements in the trade package would make passage not just more likely, but actually desirable for people like me. Now, it's not, I can say, been the smoothest sailing at home, although I didn't have searchlights and blimps following me as Ron did. But he's taken the challenge of representing Portlandia and everybody in this country to deal with transparency, to deal with enforcement, listening to ideas, crafting a proposal that I can ask any of my colleagues and I can defend to any of my constituents. We're entering the home stretch. I hope we see an agreement coming from Maui. This, of course, will be when all the pieces come together. When, because of all this hard work, everybody in America will have a chance to look at it for months. There'll be no secrets. It's there on the internet. I think it's going to get unprecedented attention, and we'll see how it measures up, matching the rhetoric with what's there, and hopefully the commitment to enforce it. I'm optimistic that we'll get an agreement. I'm optimistic that it can, in fact, measure up. And I'm proud that Ron Wyden represents my state as the senior senator. I'm pleased to have worked with him as a partner and call him a friend. Oregon has produced some truly legislative giants in the Senate. Ron knew them, he studied them, he worked with several of them, and he's on a path that will rank him equal to any of our best. And that says a lot. Ron Wyden.
That was so over the top. So over the top. What an inflationary introduction. Oh my goodness. And I saw Chairman Hatch coming out, listening to my longtime friend Earl. I'm going to tell some stories about Paul here in a moment. Earl and I basically were running for weeks what amounted to a full-time employment program for pickets and protesters. Because basically, it really worked very well as far as I could tell. They'd kind of divide up the available group, and some would go to Earl's and some would go to mine. And in rural Oregon, we had the blimps, and in Portlandia, we had something different. But let me tell all of you how invaluable Congressman Blumenauer has been in all this. He has been the go-to person, as Paul would attest to, on these environmental issues that are hugely important. The go-to person, bringing together people on both sides of the aisle, testing various kinds of ideas. We're not going to get everywhere that Earl and I want in the next 15 minutes. But with Earl's leadership, we're going to get there. So on the substance, you can't match him. But I just want to speak from a personal kind of basis for a moment, and that was nobody bucked me up in this effort like Earl Blumenauer. We were talking constantly. We'd have each other's mobile at 10 o'clock at night. And suffice it to say, when you're in this cauldron, and we've got a lot of folks at home who have deep reservations about these issues. And Earl and I have just kept chipping away at it. But he has been a wonderful friend. Getting through this was a challenge, and it was a challenge that was doable because of Earl Blumenauer. Not only does he know the substance, but with Paul, he's been a great team builder for our side. Let's give him another round of applause as well. Chairman Hatch and Chairman Ryan have been wonderful partners in all of this. Chairman Hatch and I always talk basketball because we both played pretty far along in our youth. Some of you know that I desperately wanted to play in the NBA. It was a ridiculous theory. I was too small, and I made up for it by being really slow. So that was a little bit of a problem. And as Chairman Ryan noted, we are always plotting and scheming on various kinds of policy, issues because we still share the view, as Earl does, that policy matters. And fortunately, that's a particularly strong quality in Chairman Hatch. Chairman Hatch always said, what can we do to find the common ground? That's what Paul and I have sought to do on taxes, on health care issues. Suffice it to say, we have managed to get both of us in trouble from time to time with our bases. I remember there was one health agreement we had, and a very prominent conservative went on television to talk about the Ryan-Wyden agreement, and this very prominent conservative on national television says, I like everything about the deal except the Wyden part. And yet Paul put his name on it. And so that's what you get if you try to find common ground on issues. And I will just say we're pretty well known as kind of policy wonks. And so you'll see us in that role, and we're reading GAO reports and various other kinds of big tomes. But if you really want to watch us in the upcoming trade talks, look for the guys with the big blocks of Oregon and Wisconsin-made cheese. We're going to be the guys with the stuff on the hearing tables. We're going to be the guys with the stuff on the hearing tables making our points, and Earl feels very strongly about this as well. My colleagues have talked about the substance so well tonight. I just want to make a couple of points. First, I think all of you have heard me say again and again what this has been about was saying that at this unique time in history, we wanted to get trade done right. The reality is the trade challenge today is hugely different than the challenge of the 1990s. Nobody was using an iPhone in the 1990s, so today the three of us made digital trade a huge priority. Count on the fact we're going to get the free flow of information. We're going to get the free flow of information into TPP. That's number one. Number two, on this point, and Paul, touched on it, we know that our critics out there always say that what trade agreements are about is driving the standards down. You'll hear that again and again and again. Trade is about driving everything down. Well, our point has been that the United States is the player that drives the standards up. We're the people with both the moral and the economic chops to make that case. And that's something I'm particularly proud we teamed up on, Chairman Hatch and Chairman Ryan and Congressman Blumenauer and I. And then finally, we understand this is all about high-skill, high-wage jobs. Arguably, the biggest issue by far in America is raising people's wages. People want to make more money. We know that the export jobs often pay better than do the non-export jobs. So we've got a hugely important message there with high-tech manufacturing and value-added agriculture, the engineers and the apps designers that Earl and I have living in Oregon. But I'm going to wrap up by way of saying that I do have a little bit of unfortunate news to pass on tonight. There are some jobs in America that will never exist. No agreement is going to let me get a job as a starting forward for the Portland Trailblazers. Not going to happen. Nobody is going to have a job working in the presidential security detail for Donald Trump. And Chairman Hatch has had to take off, but I think he would probably agree that no one is going to have a position tending bar at his place. So, having delivered the somewhat unfortunate news about some jobs not existing, I want to make clear, as my colleagues have, that we are not stepping back for a moment. We've got big challenges. We're not there yet. We've been talking about the customs conference. We're going to get it worked out, but everybody's going to have to give a little bit on that, and we're going to have to give a little bit on the issues that surround TPP. But I want to tell you, and I think Earl and Paul touched on it. You don't always get to have moments like this. We pass lots of stuff in the Congress, and frankly, sometimes it isn't going to be remembered in 2 weeks, let alone years. But here we had the challenge of saying that we were dealing with close to half of the global economy. There are going to be 1 billion middle-class customers in the developing world in 2025. So the question really was, were we in very difficult circumstances going to be able to get there? I'm going to wrap up with a story about my friend Paul. The pro-trade Democrats had a meeting the night before the vote. And it kind of didn't go ideally. I thought we'd just get there, we'd walk out, we'd be done. I didn't feel we had the votes that night. The vote was going to be the next morning. Paul was still in Janesville. I call him so often in Janesville, I just said, "Come in, Janesville." We didn't have the votes. I got him on the phone. I said, "Paul, we don't have the votes. I've got at least 3 pro-trade Democrats who are very much want to get there. We're not going to negotiate any final language and here's what they want and all the rest. This is ultimately going to be a trust issue, the kind of trust issue that Earl and I have, and Paul and I have, and Chairman Hatch and I have." And I said, "Here's what we need. And I know you can't sign off on all this right now, and you're just kind of getting, the concept, but we talked it through. And in half an hour, because of the goodwill of a House chairman who didn't know a whole lot, actually, about all these provisions and all these people, I could go back to him, got all the votes the next day." So I really think what we have gone through here the last few months is something that has been really important. As Earl made mention of the fact, I'm kind of the Methuselah now of the Oregon Congressional delegation. My older child was watching C-SPAN the other night, and she said, "Dad, I was watching the Senate on C-SPAN, and I figured it out that you're in the only profession on earth where somebody your age is actually still one of the young guys." And I just close on this kind of personal note because I have had a wonderful run. What a terrific life I've been accorded by the people of Oregon, this opportunity for public service. I'm a first-generation Jew. We lost family at Kristallnacht and Theresienstadt, my grandparents would never, ever have dreamed that a first-generation Jewish kid with a face for radio would have all of these opportunities that I've had to work with Earl, to work with Chairman Ryan, to work with Chairman Hatch on an issue that decades from now, people are going to say redounded to the benefit of America and to the world. I want to thank all of you for being in our corner and helping us along the way, especially to my two good friends that are here tonight. This is really a treat to be with all of you. Thanks so much.